What's up guys, hope everyone is doing well. In this video I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin. Before I get into Bitcoin, I do want to talk about the total crypto market value here. As we can see, first and foremost for the price, if we look here we see these horizontal lines corresponding with the 618 of the bear market retracements for each of these two bear markets that you can see on here. Next are these two blue trends, one horizontal with respect to, for example, the 2018 high, and then here November 2021 when the market hit around 3 trillion in total. Then there's this second descending line. As you can see, this first one has a degree of 10 and the second one has a degree of 7 degrees and 10 degrees. In each of these times you can see right here and here that once Bitcoin hits this degree, which it's obviously they are different, as I said, 10 to 7, but holding this line right here and putting it right about where 3 trillion is, we can see that they are basically the same. Really not much of a difference. It's very minor, definitely negligible. And clearly this retracement so far that the market has seen from around 2.7 trillion so far down, looking to 1.7 trillion. We can see that down here, in comparison, this is clearly not as drastic of a retracement or a correction in time, and also in terms of the severity of the percentage drawdown. But if you go to the daily, you can clearly see that there was some sort of chop here at around that just approximate 7 to 10 degree angle from the all-time high. But moving back to the weekly and then pulling up here the RSI, you can see that on the RSI there is a horizontal yellow range, a descending support green, and then this also a descending resistance red. And you can also see that since the market bottomed out, along with Bitcoin and a lot of the rest of the altcoin market as well, towards the end, last few months of December 2022, and that this 272, this blue extension on this fib tool, has basically been what has held the bull market up so far. Obviously, it has gone a little bit below it, which is what is represented by the yellow so far, as Bitcoin is coming down to this 618, also coming down to this long-term black ascending support. A lot of confluence potentially seeing here, just to give some sort of a broader all-encompassing in terms of the entire crypto market, in terms of a sentiment as to where Bitcoin might be going over the next few months, as well as all the other altcoins. Also, lastly, if you look here at the MACD, we can see this structure forming where we have an ascending resistance and a descending support, forming a megaphone type pattern with recently Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, but the crypto market value coming down and touching the very top of this could also further signify seeing the crypto market as a whole, Bitcoin mainly, finding its local low soon, or perhaps it's already there. There's also each of these descending points on the stock RSI. The entire time the market value has been going upwards. Stock RSI almost completely reset itself. So for December, from 2022 in December to currently September 2024, so basically at this point 2 years ongoing, this hidden bullish divergence as opposed to the price in comparison to the stock RSI. Here for the 6-hour chart on Bitcoin with the descending channel, broadening wedge that Bitcoin's been in since it had begun going sideways, slightly downside orientation to it from around 74,000. As I was posting on the community tab, I added these green, well, this green support in these two red resistances. The support has found a bounce recently. The candle did close a tad bit below it at around 53.5, but ultimately this has been respected so far. Bitcoin has now moved up to the 50 EMA in the band, this black band here, from around 57.7 to around 56.5. Currently, the price has retraced down to the 13 EMA. Ultimately, Bitcoin does not need to continue to go too lower here, as it will likely end up testing the bottom of this channel somewhere again around 49,000-50,000, which I definitely think that's a possibility to see, as I'll get on the higher time frame soon. See Bitcoin, if it is going to indeed go below this local low right here, September 6th roughly, that either there's the scenario Bitcoin is going to continue to fulfill the large wick of the $49,000 candle, or it's going to continue to go lower. But looking here on the 6-hour chart, as I was saying, 60K is going to be very important. Afterwards, horizontally, you're going to be looking around 64.5, so basically 65,000, and then ultimately 70K for the resistance of this channel, the upper bound on that, and then afterwards 75K would be next. Looking here at the daily, we can see similar to the 6-hour, the daily, which this descending channel, broadening channel is slightly different from what I have on the 6-hour, but they're also seeing a bounce here as well. Bitcoin is. You can also see that I think it is the 12 simplified moving average right now is where Bitcoin seems to be finding resistance. This is all also ultimately pointing to around 60K being very important. All these moving averages are basically within the same range. Just stems from the 12 all the way to the 200, creating that range around 57 to 64,000, which generally is the main range and zone that Bitcoin needs to push out of. And then afterwards then it turns into that $70,000 to $75,000 range, as I mentioned on the 6-hour chart. If you look here, it's 4-day chart. I posted the price portion of this on my X account a number of days ago, where if you go all the way back to November, December 2022 here, and Bitcoin's hitting 15,000 approximately. Since then, Bitcoin has been in an uptrend and has so far gone up a total of 377%. And as I explained in a recent video where we see this first impulse of the bull market, here we see the second. Each time, as you can see, this topped out March to April. Bitcoin then went sideways into August to September. Second impulse, March to April. We're seeing the sideways choppiness. Again, we're at August to September. So will we see a familiarity in the history, in the sense of rhyming? And perhaps this is the pattern that is really characterizing the bull market within this phase 1 of cycle 3 that we're in, according to my epic theory for Bitcoin. Before I get to the RSI, which I did not talk about that on the post I made on X, if you look here, zooming in on the sideways action, roughly 6 to 7 months, we can see this horizontal line laid right at around, well, right at 56.5, which is where basically where this candle here closed on around August 4th, which is the candle that on this 4-day chart was the wick down to 49K. As I said, I definitely think we could see Bitcoin perhaps do something along these lines. If it's going to just continue to fulfill the wick down to 49K a little bit more, maybe come down and close around 50K and then jump up from here. May not be that rapid, but generally Bitcoin could just see some sort of a further fulfillment of this wick right here. Although if it does start to, let's say it comes up and hits somewhere around 55,000 approximately, I would say anywhere from around 53 to 56,000, maybe sits here for a bit, and then ultimately gets rejected and goes lower than 49 to 48K, then likely we could see Bitcoin come down here to this region right here, which corresponds with the around 42, 43 region right here that I've been pointing out for many months as the bottom of the barrel, in my opinion, for Bitcoin, given that I do think that Bitcoin is in a bull market, has been in a bull market since 15,000 at the end of 2022. I think that I was also historically signing up with the 20 to 40% rule, going down to, just to point this out once more because it's important. I mean, I definitely make room down to even around 38,000, which is a 47% move approximately, which I'll get to later. But to get to this RSI here, we can see that since, again, going back to the price when it was at 15K, all the way back here, and upon this first impulse when it was halfway through it, coordinates to the RSI, you see this uptrend range that could potentially be respected once more so far. It seems to be the RSI seems to be finding some support here, although this could definitely change in the next few months, the rest of this year leading into 2025. Now, assuming that this temporal pattern is correct, meaning it will continue to play out and Bitcoin does top out next year somewhere around the same time, around, let's just say March, April, May, then likely the RSI would see some support here, maybe range sideways till about October, then finally break, just as it did back here last time around in October as well, when also you can see these white vector candles down here were the first three printed at the beginning of this impulse, signifying the increase in volatility and volume, denoting, like I said, the beginning of this second impulse so far. And then also, I do find it quite interesting to look here at the stock RSI on the 4-day once more, where you can see we have this general uptrend right here, where you can draw a line right through it. It's clearly had its ups and downs, but it's oriented towards the upside at the price. This entire sideways action has been oriented towards the downside, specifically just from around April to now is when it's been doing that in comparison to the stock RSI. But that could be signifying some degree of hidden bullish divergence, which is ultimately in confluence with this temporal pattern, with the way this RSI looks, and many other factors as well. Here, another 4-day chart. And I want to use this chart to really tie in basically everything I've been saying on the prior 3 Bitcoin charts in terms of whether or not Bitcoin is going to see basically a support found at just approximately 55, let's just say 53 to 57,000, roughly within this zone right here. As I pointed out in July, or actually rather, July, first week of July, when Bitcoin was had wicked down around 53.5, closed at 57.4, I was pointing out, due to an RSI that I was going over in that video, that this could likely be the local low. Whether or not Bitcoin continued to range sideways for a bit, or even went a tad bit lower, but generally somewhere around that, like I was saying, 53, 57,000, 56,000 could potentially be the low according to the way the RSI looked, and comparing it all the way back to the entirety of the past history for Bitcoin. And since then, Bitcoin has been trickling down just ever bit, just a tad bit lower since around 57.3, then 56.5, and then recently 55, around 55.8. Ultimately, though, it's just basically been ranging sideways. It is continuing to make lower highs, and it is making lower lows, which isn't the best thing. But ultimately, as I was saying, Bitcoin could continue to fill out this wick here and continue to go lower. Let's say it does this for the rest of September, because September, historically, the month in and of itself isn't particularly bullish. It's also not particularly bearish, because it's only, the highest in terms of the monthly returns over the years of Bitcoin, the highest has been around 36 or 7%, I believe. And that only happened one time. Other than that, it's no other month since 2011 was above 17 to 18%, and the average for September is just a negative 5% returns, which is basically nothing. So we could see this kind of, Bitcoin trickles down a little bit lower, rests down to 50K again approximately, and then finds a bounce into the last, what I believe to be the last impulse for this bull market, or it comes down here, like I said, comes back up, gets more rejection, and comes down to around this 43, $42,000 region. And if this happens, then I definitely believe we could see a wick, a pretty drastic, likely pretty big wick, come down to as low as around 38, 39K, because there is still this small vector region right here with respect to vector candle beginning of December of 2023 that was yet to have been recovered. Now, if Bitcoin were to lose that, just to entertain the level below it, obviously there's going to be, not just because of the way the price was trading sideways, or also around 6 to 7 months, similar to what it's been doing again recently, anywhere from around 30,000, but the vector zone specifically is around 31.5 to 27.2. So that's what I would be looking out for if, let's say, over the next few months, Bitcoin fulfills 49K, comes back up, gets rejection somewhere around 53 to 57K, comes lower, and then even loses 38 $50,000 in the long run over the next few months and leading into the first quarter of next year. Here on this weekly chart with the traditional bar candlestick patterns as opposed to the Heiken Ashis, which I typically use on every chart, every video. This weekly chart is showing a green candle, whereas as I'll get to the Heiken Ashi chart's not, so this could be potentially positive. It's also along the 0.214, which is the inverse of the 786, such as the same relationship between the 382 and the 618 being the inverse of each other. Now, if Bitcoin does continue to fulfill this 49K wick more, then that would bring, as you can see, the price all the way back down to the bottom of the channel, which was the beginning of this channel, going all the way back to the $15,000 range in 2022, and also August, September, October 2023, when Bitcoin bottomed out locally at 25,000. First impulse, second impulse, perhaps maybe will Bitcoin come lower around the same time, and then we'll see this third impulse somewhere, I think somewhere around right now, March, April, all the way up to around approximately 227,000, as I've been saying, anywhere around 200,000, give or take $30,000 to be broad about it. But the main aspect of this chart is the fact that, as I just pointed out, where this third impulse would take it up to around 227,000 around March to April, assuming that happens, that would line up with the 1.618, this turquoise ascending line, up to the 1.702, which is another number derivable from the Fibonacci numbers, creating this range, which if you then move this channel from the first or the high of the second impulse, as I have it here currently, to the high of the first impulse, you can see that the second impulse also wicked right, almost perfectly right to the 1.618. So possibly could we see this happen again? Just basically seeing the further affirmation of the structure that has been present since Bitcoin began going up from 15,000. Ultimately, this all depends upon when Bitcoin tops out. I mean, if Bitcoin tops out, let's say at earliest, at this point I would say November, although I don't think that's very likely at all, because that would just be right here. It'd only go up to, if it reached the 1.618, it would basically borderline 200K around 192,000. Although at this point, as I've been saying, I think March, April, May, and then at latest, I don't think Bitcoin will be continuing a bull market into 2026. So let's say Bitcoin tops out like December, let's just say September, October, December of 2025, and it hits the 1.618 still, then that would put it anywhere from around, well, actually, let's just do October to December. So it's going to put it somewhere around 312,000 to as high as 384,000. That's clearly, those of you familiar, not what I think is going to happen, as I think right now, which I could totally be wrong. This is not meant to be financial advice, nor do I think I'm going to be right. But my bias is somewhere around 230,000 approximately, sometime around March, April, May of next year for various reasons I've gone over already. We move in here to this weekly chart, which is the Heiken Ashi candles of the weekly. Like I said, with the normal candlesticks, we're getting a green candle, which hopefully means Bitcoin is going to reverse from here and not continue to go even lower, best case scenario. And also this current candle, even though it is red currently, is showing some sort of halting when it comes to the bearish volatility and volume towards the downside, which, again, if we go back to this 4-day chart, you can see something similar here where we're seeing this kind of stopping volume type candle. And also we can see, zooming in very closely, that the wicks of this bearish candle are white, which is, those are technically done for the bullish candles, which could also a lot of times be signaling some sort of a slowdown of the volume towards the downside when you see that paired with a red or dominantly bearish candle. And then also just with the daily bounce on the chart, the 6-hour bounce we've been seeing, obviously assuming it continues to go up here. And then also Bitcoin is on top of the 50 SMA, each of these. So we have the white 50 SMA, the black is the 200 SMA, and the orange is the 100. So 50, 100, 200. And I pointed out all these moving averages and also the 12 and 25 in a past video. One thing I left off on was the cross of the orange above the black So the 100 crossing back above the 200, which has happened within the first 10 days of September. And I think this is going to be a highly bullish crossover. I don't think this means that the price is going to continue to tank severely, meaning it's going to go below approximately 40,000 significantly, as I was out detailing earlier. Now, if we look here at the moving averages going back a little bit, you can see that whenever we saw the 50 SMA go below the 200 right here, this was ultimately bullish. Bitcoin continued to go from here, range sideways for 6 to 7 boring months, but it ultimately then led to this second and larger impulse. And then once you see this 50 cross above the 200 once more right here, this was January of 2024, and this was halfway between the second impulse, and it was ultimately only bullish. Again, quite similar to the way it happened the first time around, where we saw the 50 go below the 200 halfway through the first impulse, and then we saw it cross back above halfway through the second impulse. And as opposed to the 100 to the 200, you saw the 100 go below 200 as the second impulse was beginning. Now we're seeing it cross back above, which is only bullish. The best case scenario, you want to see the 50 at the top, the 100 in between, and then the 200 below, all of them at the bottom. It's typically what you're going to see. And this is the first time, as I said, that we even saw the 100 go below. It got close here, and it got very close here, but this has never happened. So ultimately, this is still a mystery whether or not this is going to be bearish or bullish, but factoring in other things and the way these other moving averages look here currently, as I detailed, and then also throughout the past, makes me believe that it's more bullish, going to turn out more bullish rather than bearish. Looking here, actually, so one thing, okay. So looking here at this 2 weekly chart, again, we have this long-term macro uptrend since 2017. We have this shorter term uptrend since the bottom, bear market bottom 2022, 15,000. There was the bounce here beginning this, the bounce here in September. And then also currently, are we going to see it bounce again? As I said, we have March, April, September, October, or August, September, March, April, August, September. Perhaps Bitcoin will fulfill that $49,000 wick, find a bounce from here, as I have detailed here with this little bar pattern, and then continue higher to where my bias is sometime March, April, May, 227,000, somewhere roughly, just kind of right here in this region. And then this extends purple. The purple extends all the way out to the end of 2025, because that's just at the latest, which I think Bitcoin will top out at and end the bull market. One thing I do want to point out on this RSI here is that this is, you can see that the RSI is right on top of the Bollinger Bands. Has not crossed just yet, but is right on top of that. That's something that's Bitcoin's really seen going back in the all-time history. It did not happen here from 2015 to 2017. It never even went below the median until basically the bear market was over. The March crash would be the only thing similar to it, but due to the difference in the structures of that first half of phase 1, which is what this massive W right here is, and then the second half of phase 1 would be this correction, and then this uptrend right here, which is what happened back here. We see this W, first impulse, correction, second impulse, but now we're seeing that same thing happen again in a self-similar fashion, but it's just extended through time, and I mean, it's lengthening of the phases, and then also bull markets, bear markets are less severe. So again, this could ultimately be bearish, seeing this RSI go down this low, especially even going below the Bollinger Bands, but it also could at the same time indicate it being quite oversold, paired with the fact that every time Bitcoin has come up from all-time lows locally in terms of the cycles and the phases, it has come up to this much as it has from 15 to 75,000 and then traded at the all-time high. This is every single time in history always coincided with more upside. This is actually the longest time in history for Bitcoin that has ever traded this long here at prior all-time highs. There was no trading sideways here. There was very minor trading sideways here, basically negligible, and there was again none here going back to 2013. And this so far has been 6 to 7 really 7 more, so 7 months at this point of just boring sideways with a slight downwards orientation. A lot of unheard of things, a lot of things that never really happened in the past for Bitcoin have happened within this phase 1 of cycle 3, as Bitcoin has become further and further decayed and aged and just mature over time. But here for this last chart on the monthly, each of these lines, I went over this, but I changed the colors of the lines, but each of the turquoise lines are September, as well as the pink lines are also September, but the turquoise are bullish and the pink are bearish Septembers. And then obviously we have this horizontal yellow here sitting at around $43,000 just to be the bottom of the barrels I was mentioning earlier. If Bitcoin loses 49K substantially. And then we have these blue lines here just lining up with March, local high, again, March, local high, and then September, local lows for the uptrend, the corrections of the uptrends, and leading into, and perhaps again, March, April, around the price targets I have been mentioning. Now, a vital thing that I want to point out here is the fact that there are no monthly, and this is the index charts, so this has all the data you could ask for Bitcoin. There are no vector candles, no high volume vector candles, so these white ones here, as you can see, none of these below where I have put this horizontal line, where I think Bitcoin could come down to its lowest and actually continue out a bull market. As I was showing on this 4-day chart, how there is that, small room down to 38, 37K if Bitcoin were to lose 49, 50K. That's still definitely possible despite the fact that these vector candles aren't here, but this does draw a little bit more emphasis given that this is a higher time frame chart overall. But outside of that, as always, hopefully you enjoyed. None of this is meant to be financial advice. But all of that being said, and everything else gone over, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Ooh, I'm regretting now.